page number 9 of Masechet Menachot, making phenomenal progress over here. Already 1 week into this beautiful tractate, as it's very much twinned also with Masechet Zvachim, which we were learning about over there and just completed just over a week ago, friends, and a lot to take over, a lot of content on today's page. And we're going to explore a few of the highlights over here. Just recording this actually from a coffee shop in Israel, here in the city of Bet Shemesh, to be precise, the new Shtera Mall, which I very much recommend people to visit if you happen to be inside the area. Nothing like visiting the malls of Bet Shemesh. I already said a blessing with the Shea called with something else I had before. So as I drink this, don't think I'm not saying a bracha. Okay. What's going on, friends? On today's page, it's actually very interesting from the My Jewish Learning site that I was just reading over. An interesting note that we see a robust debate between Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish, just on many occasions before. We're all very familiar with them. It was stated that if one mixed the oil of a meal offering into it outside the wall of the Bet HaMikdash courtyard, Rabbi Yochanan says that it is going to be disqualified. Reish Lakish is going to say that it is valid. So, is it good or not? That's a matter of dispute over here. So, Reish Lakish obviously says it's valid. So, why does he? He says it's valid as it is written. He quotes a pasuk in the book of Vayikra, in Parshat Vayikra, in chapter number 2, verse 1. And he shall pour oil upon it and put frankincense upon it. And then it's going to be written, the terminology, and he shall bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests. This is the next verse, in verse number 2, in chapter number 2. So what's going on, friends, over here? Rabbi Yochanan, he's going to have a view that all steps of the meal offering must be performed in the Bet HaMikdash. But Reish Lakish, he notices that the text in Leviticus, in Vayikra, implies otherwise. In these verses, the offerer mixes oil into the meal and then he places frankincense on top, and only then does he hand it to the Kohanim. This implies, friends, that these first steps can be done by non-Kohanim. You don't have to be a Kohen per se to do this. And let's say the Gemara explains the next logical conclusion to this, as we are just building up here on a Gemara, how we can do this. And it says over here, Rav Yochanan says this meal offering began outside the Bet HaMikdash courtyard is disqualified, since a meal offering's performance is in a service vessel, in a kli. Therefore, granted that, let's say, the Kohanik, the priesthood, is not required, yet in any event its performance inside the Bet HaMikdash courtyard is required, like bringing now a Braita about to build this in. We learn, and it's taught in Braita, if a meal offering was mixed by a non-Kohen, it is valid, but if it was mixed outside the wall of the Bet HaMikdash, it is disqualified. So seemingly, it's not necessarily if a non-Kohen is going to bring this in of itself, it's where you actually do this process, where's the code of conduct actually done within regards to this service. What's interesting is that Rav Yochanan is going to concede that anyone can mix the oil into the meal. However, he's going to reject the inference that anyone effectively means anyone. Why is this, friends? Because it has to be mixed in one of the temple's vessels, and those can't be removed from the Bet HaMikdash grounds. As there's a note inside the Gemara that states that Rabbi Yochanan is backed up by a conclusory Braita that confirms his argument, which suggests he's going to, let's say, potentially come out on top of this debate. However, the halacha concurs, I believe, with Rabbi Yochanan, quoted over, as it usually does when he and Reish Lakish, let's say, are in a robust debate together. Let's say this finding does read as, let's say, more of a pshara, a compromise to some sort. But I think it still remains, let's say, a specific scenario that a regular person can do their own mixing of oil, but they have to do it in the Bet HaMikdash courtyard for it to be successful, which is very, very much interesting. Now, I want to share over something from yesterday's page also, which I think was actually very interesting. I think from Rabbi Goldberg, Elliot Goldberg, if I'm not mistaken, once again, from the Jewish Learning site. We know that yesterday, it's really all connected, all these stuff in all these pages of the Gemara. There was a meal offering with the three essential components to it, which is spoken about on various occasions before: flour, oil, and frankincense. What's the code of conduct here? Initially, flour is obviously going to be placed inside a kli, inside a vessel. Oil is poured on top and mixed into it, and then frankincense is placed on top. Now, any of the cooks or chefs out there, you'll all know how to the orders within regards to mixing things and so on and so forth. God forbid to compare something as holy as this in the Beit HaMikdash, avodah, to that, but just stating, just to picture a scenario in of itself. And now after that, the priest will scoop a handful that includes all of the frankincense, livona, as we called it. And it's important to know at what specific time, moment, these ingredients all become, let's say, have a level of sanctification to it. And there's a dispute about that very question we saw about, especially in yesterday's page, which is going to be connected very much to today's page. We see that I think Rav says that a meal offering is sanctified without its oil. Similarly, it is sanctified without its frankincense. Further, this is what we're talking about, Rav. Furthermore, a meal offering is sanctified without its oil and without its frankincense, without both. And oil and frankincense are each, over here, sanctified independently, gets its kedusha to it. This substance, let's say this substance without that one, and that substance without that one, we have to illustrate over. What's interesting is that Rav Hanina says over here, he's going to come in and say, neither is this substance sanctified without that, nor is that sanctified without this. So there's a stark difference between the two opinions over here, friends. Now, if we recollect back in Masechet Zvachim, which was like an encyclopedia within regards to korbanot in of itself, respectively, the vessels used in the Beit HaMikdash service obviously have a specific ability to convey a very different kedusha to sacrificial items. And going back over there, according to Rav, each of the elements of the meal sacrifice becomes sanctified when it is placed in its own vessel. That is, obviously, the flour becomes sanctified as soon as it is placed inside the bowl, inside the kara, respectively, even before the other ingredients are added. However, oil and frankincense similarly become sanctified when they are placed into the vessels that will deliver them to the flour. Rabbi Hanina, I think, will weigh in and say on the other hand that the ingredients do not become sanctified until all three ingredients are brought together. Once, obviously, it's sanctified over here, the item's status as a korban, as an offering for Hashem, is going to be fixed. It cannot revert back to a lower level of sanctity in the case of subsequent missteps in the ritual. And it's obviously important to know exactly which items are sanctified and which items are not, just for the process in of itself. We can go on further over here. Yes, that's very interesting. So we say that this debate actually resonates, let's just say, in various different ways. You can say you can plug it in onto different topics in of itself. Like, for example, many people, when we're talking about vessels inside the Beit HaMikdash, on Shabbat, for example, we obviously sanctify the day, the Shabbat in of itself, when we are on our shulchan, which is like a mizbeach, you could argue, inside the Beit HaMikdash, over a cup of wine, naturally, and obviously, ideally, with a dry red glass of wine. I have to point out that it's optimum when we're doing it, and how important it is to, if all things being equal, someone will do the kiddush on wine, especially on Friday night, on Shabbat morning, also on Havdalah, also respectively. To dry red wine is always optimal to have over there. We can also add that, obviously, many houses on Shabbat, when they're doing the kiddush, will have a specific cup of wine, gevia, over there. And it's used as part of the kiddush on the Friday night. Just like in the Beit HaMikdash, let's say vessels or kelim were reserved for specific use in of itself. So too, let's say, for example, these items, you've got a challah cutting board, even inside a house, inside one's locale, that's used to cut the bread on. The kiddush cup is also over there. It's used for that. And we don't like to take those items which have lichvot Shabbat Kodesh and use it during the week, because it's not the same zest. One should have separate, they don't just mention within regards to kelim for the Shabbat foods in of itself to be separate. They also say all throughout the week how important it is to have things different, separate shoes on Shabbat, separate clothing for Shabbat, and so on and so forth. So that's also a very interesting thing. So we're obviously, just to go back to this Gemara discussion itself about the sacrificial system, let's say, can feel technical and not specifically spiritual in some cases. Yes, I think that we can definitely add over here, there is a spiritual component within Gaza. Obviously, it's likely that some of the debate about when the meal offering becomes sanctified, it's about how people felt and not just, let's say, legal principles and interpretive hermeneutics that they use. And a thing that becomes sacred, we have to add out when people feel that it is sacred. Determining what or when that it creates a specific norm in of itself. That's very, very interesting. It's just an insight with regards to Menachot, page number 8 also. So I recommend everyone to look over, these pages of Gemara. Friends, we've already covered, over a week's worth of Masechet Menachot. So don't miss out every single day. We are going to learn together like a community every single day, different insights inside the Daf Yomi. Very, very exciting, I must point out. Also, Bez Hashem, we're all going to grow together and watch this space for more tidbits every single day as we go through. We have really been recording these tidbits since the start of Masechet Ketubot, if you cast your minds back. So I recommend everyone to check over the previous videos we've done and recordings which we've done on this tractate over here. So I think on that note, I can wish you all a fantastic day. Take care and thanks for watching. Thank you.